We are the opposition to beauty. True comedy is not caring what it looks like. You know what I mean? True comedy is putting it all out there. And I don't care if my audience is, I've had audience of 20,000, I've had audiences of 50. And if you're really a good comic, you give those 50 people the best experience you can give them.
Mm.
And being a comedian as a female, as opposed to being a comedian as an actress, is very freeing because we're not necessarily judged on our appearance. It's judged on what we're bringing to the audience. I always joke as a comic, I can gain 10 or 15 pounds and still be appreciated for my art, and actresses are like, they're so marginalized.
Welcome to the Kalos Center podcast. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Kalos Center podcast. Our guest today is Kerri Pomarolli. She's a national headlining stand-up comedian who's worked with the likes of Jay Leno, Jim Carrey, Carol Channing, and Jerry Lewis. She's been featured on The Tonight Show a couple of dozens of times, and she's appeared on Comedy Central, Netflix, ABC, CNN, Roku, Amazon Prime, and just about every other network, as well as LA's top comedy clubs. A person of devout faith, Kerri is regularly featured on Christian networks and has toured with a host of Christian artists and speakers, from the Newsboys to Johnny Erickson Tata. Kerri is also very active in the pro-life movement and has hosted and performed at many pro-life events and fundraisers. Kerri is also an author whose books include How to Ruin Your Dating Life, a Christian's Guide for Avoiding Almost Every Mistake in the Book, and another entitled She Rises Late and Her Kids Make Her Breakfast, Devotions for the Proverbs 32 Woman, and a book on the faith trials of the single life called Guys Like Girls Named Jenny. And as a nationally syndicated columnist, Kerri's writings also regularly appear in several popular magazines. She also has a podcast with her teenage daughter, Lucy, called the Carpool Comedy Podcast, which is hysterical. I would describe it as high-energy, spontaneous reflections on all aspects of culture: sports, food, beauty pageants, short shorts, cemeteries, and the mafia, among other topics. So with that, Kerri, welcome to the Kalos Center podcast.
Hello, my friend. I'm glad to be here.
So I actually dated a girl named Jenny.
Well, you get that all girls named Jenny are cute and adorable. And Jenny stole my boyfriend from kindergarten, and I'm not over it. And there's been a string of Jennies in my life that are cute and adorable. Like, you can't be not cute if you're Jenny.
Yep. Well, she was a cute one. In the end, I was not up to her caliber, but she did make me better. So there you go.
I feel like back in the 80s, all the girls were named like Jenny and like Jessica, and they had like cute. Now kids are named like Olive and Rupel and, Tree Stump. Like, they're just not, like, our names were solid, Jim, Kerri, Jenny, Bob, you know.
My brothers are Tom, Bob, and John. And then there's me.
Right? Yeah. It's not complicated.
Right. So I have not had so much fun preparing for a podcast as this. My wife would hear me laughing in my study as I was watching your work, and it was, Jim, what are you doing in there? Just working, honey. Research. So that's been a lot of fun. Let me just start by asking you about your tour. You're currently on tour, right? How is that going?
Well, it's going great. I sort of am on tour 9 months out of the year. I just go where I'm asked to go. It's crazy. I mean, I'm going to Canada. I'm going to Missouri. I'm going to North Carolina. I think I need a tour manager if you need another job, because I go like zigzag across the country and now North America. But I live in Sacramento, California, Jim. It's very hot here in the summer. So I'm trying to do a tour, get me out of Sacramento this summer. I will come for free, and then I'll work for you if you just book me out of Sacramento summer, because it's 110 degrees the whole summer and it's miserable.
Wow.
But so I'm just kind of all over the place. I mean, the only state I haven't toured in is Alaska.
I was just going to mention Anchorage as a potential alternative for you.
I'm like, book me out of Sacramento this summer. Book me out of Sacramento. But so I'm having, and I'm taking my daughter Ruby with me a lot. Her story is very prevalent to my pro-life desires to help that movement, because my daughter was born with something health challenge wise that has a very, very, very high abortion rate, like 80%. And she's 14 now, and she was born with all these challenges, but she's overcome them. And so she comes on stage with me to talk about how every life matters. And then it's a really powerful testimony. But she can come on stage in front of 1,000 people and get a standing ovation. But I had to kick her out of the talent show that I'm heading up at her school last week because she wasn't practicing her dance moves. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't play favorites. You kind of are not bringing your A game. And then she's 14. She's like, fine. I'm like, you're out. You're out. You want fame? Fame costs. So now I'm hosting the talent show without my daughter because she didn't practice her dance.
Oh no. So your strong convictions regarding sanctity of life, that's clearly an outworking of your faith. Talk about your faith journey and how that impacts your professional life, both on and off the stage.
Yeah, I'm an Italian, Irish, Catholic, Detroit kid with a Presbyterian mom. And I moved to Los Angeles and just went to church when there was free food, potluck dinners. And around my mid-20s, I guess it really became real to me. I was always raised in, I guess we would have called it a religious family. But in my mid-20s in California, my faith relationship with God, whatever you want to call it, was just more of a piece of my life than just showing up on Sundays. And then it started to affect my decisions as a career and my decisions as a person. And God just sort of politely invaded all areas of my life, which led me to stand-up comedy. Because an actress in Hollywood, I was very happy to acting, but the roles were very challenging. And when you're an actor, you have to wait for somebody to write you a role. But when you're a stand-up comedian, you can write your own material, you know? So that's kind of how stand-up started, was because of my faith.
So one of my interests is philosophy of art and aesthetics. And so I reflect, on, all the different art forms, especially music and film, but also, the theatrical side and, stand-up comedy. And I've often reflected on, this question, what are the key ingredients to being an effective comedian? And I've landed on these three. One,
I can't wait to hear them. You tell me. Okay.
Yeah. So being observant, being a good writer, and courage. Does that seem right to you, and would you add anything to that list?
You forgot whiskey, but yeah. Basically, this is Carlos Oscar says this. He's an amazing comedian. He says, people say funny things. Comedians say things funny. So I was talking to you earlier about some of my life experiences, and you were laughing because I have normal everyday life experiences, but because my brain works differently, they become funny. Like the world is talking about RFK, right? RFK is going to save the health. He's so great. Well, my comedian brain is like, he's going to take my Pop-Tarts and I'm going to have to go to Mexico to get my candy. And so, and then some of those, I was joking about going to Canada and I ate their candy, but they don't have chemicals and their candy tastes like broken dreams. So these are like everyday life experiences that I have that you would have. But as a comedian, we just automatically go, oh, this is kind of peculiar. I think I'll talk about it on stage.
So you're also an author, and you've published books on dating, singleness, as well as parenting, as well as some of those in devotional form. Do you think of yourself as a writer first or as a performer who also writes?
That's really kind of you. And by the way, there was some marriage in there. I married a comedian who is at my house 7 days a week. And we actually got divorced 11 years ago. And we're touring massive tours everywhere. And then this past Valentine's Day, we took the stage together for the first time in over a decade. It was kind of crazy. But I love writing with a passion. Like I love. But if you made me give up one, it would be writing before it would be comedy, because I think comedy fuels my soul. It's a ministry. It's a way to connect with people. I love writing movies. I've written for the Hallmark Channel and really grateful for that and want to write more. Love it so much. It financially is a better deal. I don't have to leave my house, but I get such a thrill of going in front of people. And sometimes I share the gospel. If I'm at a church and they allow me to, I'll share the gospel after my comedy. And that is the biggest thrill. But then in club, it's also really fun when you're comic number 47 at 11:30 and everyone's wasted and nobody expects you to be a girl comic who's funny and you go out and make them laugh. I did that at the Hard Rock Casino last weekend, and the booker came up and he was kind of like surprised that I was really funny because he knows I'm clean, and he wants to book me again. So I like the challenge. Now, who do you like in comedy? Who do you think is funny?
My all-time favorite is George Carlin. Tim Hawkins is one of my favorite contemporary
They're
comics.
so different. Tim Hawkins is so different that
Yeah.
they're like yin and yang, even in their stylings, because George Carlin is so like ethereal, and I love smart. Not that Tim's not smart; he's a friend of mine, but I love quick-witted comedy. You know what I mean? Like he was so fast.
Yeah, George Carlin's his social and cultural observations are sometimes so keen and insightful. You get yourself thinking so much you might forget to laugh, but there's a lot of insight there.
You know who the modern George Carlin to me is? Bill
Who's
Burr.
that? I haven't seen him. Phil.
He's so funny, but he just says it, and he's not Christian, but he says things that are so prolific and funny. Like he's talking about the world and Black Lives Matter and all this stuff. And I can't do it justice, but he was like, how do white women get themselves in the middle of every racial conflict and make it about them? And I'm a white woman and I'm laughing because just go to Facebook, right? And all these middle-class Caucasians are like, I'm just really triggered by the Black Lives Matter being, and I'm like, it's not about you. But, yeah, he's really funny. He just says it like it is. I love Sebastian Maniscalco. I love Jim Gaffigan. I still like Eddie Murphy, Tracy Morgan, all those SNL guys.
Now, am I going out on a limb to speculate that maybe your daughter Lucy was named after one of the all-time?
No, it's funny. Everyone asks that. I just like the name Lucy McGee. It means bringer of light.
Okay.
And then she's actually, Ruby and Lucy are my daughters, and they both have Kenny Rogers songs about women of the night in their names. Ruby, don't take your love to town. You picked a fine time to leave me, Lucille. Yeah, I love Lucille Ball. I grew up on Lucille Ball and Carol Burnett and Tracy Ullman. But movies, I'm a huge movie buff. I mean, huge. The only one I don't like is horror, but it is my favorite pastime. If you'll find me anywhere watching movies with my kids.
One of my all-time favorites, maybe my single.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what's your favorite?
My favorite, I was going to say actor, but he was more than that. My favorite film figure in history, I think, is the most, all things considered, talented person in the history of film, and that's Buster Keaton.
Well, yeah, you're going way back. We just lost half our audience, but I know who you're talking about.
So the comedic father of Jim Carrey, as you know, is Jerry Lewis. The comedic father of Jerry Lewis is Buster Keaton.
Buster Keaton, Red Skelton, those guys that were so physical. Lucille Ball was a genius.
Yep.
That you just don't get it. You don't see it. Jim Carrey, she's the mother of generation of Jim Carrey comedy. I was in a thing Farrell started, and a lot of great comedians started. And my teacher was like, you need to go over to Second City instead of being here. Second City's where John Belushi and Eugene Levy. He said they write more. In Groundlings, we roll on the stage and set ourselves on fire. And you clearly don't want to do that. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do that. But, so there's such a different layer of comedy when you watch like a Tina Fey, Amy Poehler that are more like intellectual writing, or you watch the brilliance of Damon Wayans from In Living Color and Mad TV and Sherry O'Terry and Will Ferrell that were more character driven and physical,
So comedy is, I think we can agree, it's a kind of theatrical art. And the arts are generally understood as, interested in beauty. Do you think of what you do as a way of creating beauty?
No, I think comics are the most unsexy thing on stage. You should see the physical that people take of me and post on Facebook. I always joke that there isn't one normal picture of me on the internet. It's me. I do get physical. It's funny that you say that. I do go down on my hands and knees and I do. I think it's beautifully funny, but we are the opposition to beauty. True comedy is not caring what it looks like. You know what I mean?
Mm,
True comedy is putting it all out there. And I don't care if my audience is, I've had audience of 20,000, I've had audiences of 50. And if you're really a good comic, you give those 50 people the best experience you can give them.
mm,
And being a comedian as a female, as opposed to being a comedian as an actress, is very freeing because we're not necessarily judged on our appearance. It's judged on what we're bringing to the audience. I always joke as a comic, I can gain 10 or 15 pounds and still be appreciated for my art, and
that's
actresses are
good.
like, they're so
Mm,
marginalized. But
that's good.
anyway, yeah.
So Aristotle said that tragedy is about catharsis, purging negative emotions like fear and pity. He doesn't seem to see comedy on the same level in that regard. But do you think that comedy could have a similar cathartic or even cleansing effect on people? Do you ever feel that your humor is cathartic for you?
I think that my humor is cathartic for me and for my audiences. And I have proof. People come up to me and they're like, my mom just died. I haven't been out in 3 months. This is the first time I let it go. I'm going through chemo. This is an hour where I didn't think about the chemo. I didn't think about my divorce. I didn't think about the problems. And also, I like to joke that my life should make you feel better about your life because you'll drive
Mm.
home and be like, I am not as messed up as that girl. And we used to joke about that when we did marriage events. Like Ron and I were like, you're going to feel amazing about your spouse after hearing us argue. So I think it's very cathartic and healing, very healing.
One of the next questions I wanted to ask was regarding the fact that your routines will touch on difficult and even painful issues, which a lot of comics do, even though that might seem counterintuitive.
No, good comedy comes from pain, Jim.
Yeah,
Good. If
good.
a comedian gets rich and famous and they're not struggling anymore, they're usually not funny.
Mm. So you also bill yourself, and I think this is truth in advertising, as someone who crushes clean comedy.
I didn't write that. Somebody wrote it. But
No, I think that's right. And it's often said that this is more challenging. And I've reflected on that and wondered why that is the case. I think it is the case, but I don't know if you're familiar with the three major theories of humor among philosophers of humor. One is the superiority theory, which says that we laugh when we have a sudden sense of superiority to someone, which you certainly capitalize on that. The another theory is the incongruity theory, which says that we laugh when we find, say, a couple of things put together that aren't normally combined, right? Like
yeah.
so a talking dog, for example, or a man in a dress, or a woman with a mustache, or whatever. And then the third kind of humor is a sort of relief, where you have, and people like Freud and Herbert Spencer proposed this, that we laugh to relieve social tension. Something inappropriate's been done, and we feel nervous about that, and then we laugh to relieve the tension. Now, if you go after, say, dirty humor, you're kind of capitalizing on that relief a factor all the time. If you're going with clean comedy, it's like there's a whole category of humor that isn't open to you. Does that make sense?
Girls would go on stage and just say the raunchiest, most sexual thing, and the audience would go like a reaction to it, like when you were in 5th grade and somebody showed you a dirty magazine. It was like, haha. They're not laughing out of joy. It's more like, ooh, right? Now, I still use the art of surprise. I go to Texas and I say, I'm so sorry about your immigration problem, and they get scared, and I'm like, because Californians are buying up all your real estate. So it's the art of surprise, and comedians putting, like you said, two things together. But when they're laughing at dirty comedy, sometimes, unless you're like Richard Pryor or Eddie Murphy, and it's like real to them. Like, I'm laughing at Kevin Hart's true stories about his uncle, who was a crackhead, who would show up at school in nothing but a trench coat. And that's not necessarily the cleanest stories, right? But that was authentic to his life. So I can appreciate that. Being dirty to get attention, which is what a lot of up and comers do, it's just to try to get a laugh out of somebody because you can't write a joke. Do you know what I mean? Like, write a joke and make them laugh. So I get a lot of comments, oh, I really liked you. Something was different about you. I'm not sure what it was. They don't necessarily go, you were the only clean one, but I don't mind I can appreciate some comics that are really not clean as long as they don't offend me. But I think that Chappelle, he swears a lot in his act, but he's not offending me. And I think he's funny.
And it's in the context of genuine and often surprising insights.
Yeah, well, Chappelle talks like that off stage, so he's going to talk like that. Like Richard Pryor swore a lot off stage, so he was being authentic. He grew up in the hood. This is how they spoke. I can appreciate that, and I can also appreciate people that go, I don't like it, because comedy is very subjective. There are brilliant comics out there that I wouldn't pay a lot of money to go see, but gosh darned, they're selling out stadiums. So comedy is very subjective.
Yeah, for sure. They're different styles, and some prefer a more slapstick physical comedy. Others a more intellectual kind of comedy. And
I don't know what my comedy is. What do you think my comedy is?
There's definitely a physicality to it. And there's, some significant social insights. You do create incongruities there along the way. There is that element of surprise and that feeling of superiority, right? That you are self-deprecating in a way that is endearing to people.
Well, the first rule of comedy is make the audience like you. That's the rule. And I'll tell you a story, Jim. When I was in my 20s and I was starting comedy, I had a mentor. His name is Bone, and he is a 6'6" African-American guy from Texas. And we would go to the clubs, and I would wear a cute little t-shirt and very tight t-shirt, and it would say, your boyfriend says hello, right? And he goes, Kerri, you can't go on that stage and make all the women hate you. Like, you can't be trying to be the hot girl. That's not comedy. You have to make the women like you, and then the men know it's okay to laugh at you. You know what I mean? And so now I go to, I do co-ed shows all the time. Now, sometimes I do a women's show and a guy will be there because their wife was like, come to the show. And I love that because I just like to make fun of the dude. I'm like, did she tell you it was Monster Truck Rally tonight? And are you excited for my mammogram jokes? So, but you have to make the women in the audience like you, and then the men will come around.
It's good. Well, I loved it from the start. And even on your website, when I first went to your website, that photograph of you is just right because
thank you.
There's a certain subtle goofy quality. I mean, you're not making a wildly goofy face, but there's something comedic in that pose that really works. So whoever chose that,
thanks, Jim. Thank you.
Nice work. So here's a theological question for you. Would you say that God is a comedian?
I think God is a lot funnier than we think. I think we don't give him enough credit for being funny. And I don't get it how people think Jesus was funny. I don't know if he was or not, but life is funny. Circumstances are funny. The way that our lives are orchestrated are funny. We just have to see it with the right lens. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's exactly right. I don't know what if Jesus did a stand-up routine. I don't know exactly what his approach would be. I guess being omniscient, you could pretty much dial up any style and he'd nail it.
I do joke about the Bible all the time. I'm like, I read the Bible and I read it like a comedian. So like Peter walked on water, and I'm like, well, what if there was another disciple who tried named Jerry and he ate too many fishes and loaves and he sank and we don't even hear about Jerry. So I just sort of think biblical thoughts I'm like, what about Mary and Martha? That that story about Jesus going to Mary and Martha's house, and Mary's so good and Mary sat at Jesus' feet, but Martha made all the snacks. Okay. Martha cleaned the house. Martha made a cheese board. She's getting a bad rap. So I'm always thinking that God is funny in the way he wrote things. Half of my prayer life is just looking up to heaven going, you saw that, right? You freaking saw that, because humanity just needs a good spanking from God, all the time, I think.
And comic relief. Yeah. So my wife and I will often say to one another about some life situation that you can, and other people say this, it's a very common idiom that you can't write this. You have some confluence of events in your life that is so bizarre, we say coincidental and comical, that really, if you wrote it, nobody would, they couldn't suspend their disbelief. But that would be an aspect of God's comedy. Just the crazy situations we find ourselves in, which as a parent, right, it seems like every day there's a new comical situation.
Well, and my new Spotify project is called Things I Shouldn't Say This Out Loud. I think that's what it's called. And I think that's the gift of comedy. It's just walking on stage and being able to go, I know what you're thinking. I know that you have to, support all these tariffs and we're really excited. But if he tariffs China, then there's no more Temu and we're all secretly upset about that. So it's just sort of like saying silly things that will get a reaction of like, I thought that too. I talk about marriage. I talk about how women can never be sick. We could be bleeding and hemorrhaging in our brains, and we still have to drive the car. But I say to the women, like, raise your hand if you think men are like a little wimpy when they get sick. And just that act of like, yeah, we all think it, like we all think it. So I guess comedy, you're right, is being observant and then calling it out.
Yeah. No, that's a universal about men. I think I can plead guilty on behalf of all 4.2 billion of us, and
I'm like, you guys go and kill bears and hunt and fish and ravage, and you go to the dentist and you're in the bed for 4 days. Like, we give birth and we're back out in the fields. It's just so funny. But then I have a whole joke about how women are mad at men for getting sick, and it's a whole thing. But I think life is, you really nailed it. It's just about being observant.
Yeah, I do a lot of renovations. I'm kind of an amateur carpenter, and I've renovated virtually our whole house, our current house. It's about 180 years old. And wow. I did electrical in all the rooms, right?
Wow.
And so I've gotten pretty good at that. Then I can't find the mayonnaise in my refrigerator. I admit that it can seem a little odd.
I think that about kids today, right? Like, kids today can fix my computer, right? And communicate internationally, but they can't order a meal at a restaurant with the parent, like, helping them. They can't pick up the phone and dial, like, that is the thing that's so different about, I always say, back in my day, we were in the field running from the cops because we had a bonfire or going off to Mexico for spring break, and my kids are taking the trash out and they're like, it's too dark, so it's just so the irony of it, right? The irony of what we can and can't do.
Yeah. And we're all contradictions in that regard, I suppose. So I like to ask all of our guests this, and that is about the meaning of life. Besides the obvious universal quest for Skittles and great pizza, what would you say is the meaning of life?
Well, obviously it's sushi, so let's just start there. But the meaning of life, from my perspective as a Christian, is that when I'm done with this life, I will have done everything that I was called to do. And I also think that is walking through this life with integrity. And that is the hardest part, because if I wasn't a Christian, I'm Italian, I could handle things my own way, but it's walking through this life. So at the end of it, God looks at me and says, well done, good and faithful servant.
Very good. Amen. Well, this has been so much fun, Kerri, and thanks for all you do. Keep up the great work, and hope to see you on stage sometime soon.
I just want to tell you, Jim, you're really smart. You're really smart, and I appreciate you. Your questions have made me think about things differently, and I appreciate that today. So I think you're a great host, and congratulations.
Well, thank you. And feel free to use me as a butt of a joke.
I thought you said you want to be my opener, but okay.
Yeah, both. All right, good. Thank you, Kerri.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Kalos Center podcast. To get notified when we publish a new episode, please subscribe. And let us know what you think by leaving us a review.